Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for May 22nd, 2025. The world has reached a tipping point where action is necessary to avoid a plunge into a dark age. This is typified by 5 people being killed in 3 separate assassinations yesterday, all of which point toward those who wish to introduce total chaos into a world situation rather than have the developments toward peace which are beginning to take place, especially involving the Putin-Trump rapprochement discussion that took place on Monday. Now, obviously, the threat of peace breaking out is driving the war party crazy. Now, let me just start by defining what I mean by the war party. We're talking about the City of London bankers, the corporate oligarchs, typified by the World Economic Forum, and the corporate cartels who fund the neocons, the think tanks, the Zionist lobby, and are committed to geopolitics, which includes a war, if necessary, to prevent an alternative from coming into place. So let me point to these 3 events which occurred yesterday, which are extremely ominous and which require action by governments to ensure security for people involved in seeking peace. First, in Mexico City, 2 top aides to the Mexico City mayor were assassinated outside their offices in public in broad daylight. The mayor of Mexico City is the second most powerful position politically in Mexico, and the mayor is close to the president, Claudia Sheinbaum. This should be seen as a warning to leaders in the global south that they play by the rules or else. Secondly, in Madrid, Spain, Andrei Portnoy, a former aide to Viktor Yanukovych, who was overthrown by the regime change coup in February 2014, he was assassinated after dropping his children off at school. He has been a target of the Ukrainian hit list Mirotvorets, which is connected to the Center for Countering Disinformation, financed by the government of the United Kingdom, its Foreign Office, and in the past it's been financed by the United States State Department and NATO. Targeted by the Mirotvorets CDC are leaders of the Schiller Institute and collaborators of the Schiller Institute, and also on the list until recently was Tulsi Gabbard, who is Trump's Director of National Intelligence. Now, the question comes up, is Trump on this list? Well, there was a news item published May 20th by Mirotvorets News, which essentially identified Trump as in their sights. They say, quote, Trump's earlier statements, and then they put in parentheses, he's a friend of international war criminal Putin, were more decisive. He said, quote, nothing will happen until Putin and I meet. And in parentheses again, they say Putin, an international war criminal and Trump's friend, unquote. Well, that's fairly direct, a target of the President of the United States. And put that together with Tulsi Gabbard's report on how she's looking into James Comey as part of an assassination threat against President Trump. Now, why target Trump? Well, we have the statement from Yuri Ushakov, top Putin aide, on the Trump-Putin phone call on Monday. And in talking about who's opposing the rapprochement between the United States and Russia, they talked about the threat from the war party, and Putin reported to Trump that on May 7th, just before the Victory Day parade in Moscow, over 500 drones and Storm Shadow missiles were targeted into Russia, mostly aimed at Moscow. They were thwarted, but they directly threatened foreign participants of the festive events. And Ushakov quoted Putin as saying, the authors of these intimidations were those who honor Nazi criminals and promote militaristic views. Then Ushakov goes back to discussing the conversation, and he said, Trump said during the conversation that he was deeply impressed by the price paid for the victory in World War II by the Soviet Union. The American leader said the Russians sacrificed more lives than anyone else in the war. Many people in the United States, Trump said, do not believe him when he says this, but this remains the case. And then Ushakov continues, the president spoke extensively and warmly about the fact that the countries, that is the U.S. and Russia, were World War II allies. Trump remembers we were brothers in arms, and he regretfully said that due to strange circumstances, our countries today are not only not together, but very far apart, unquote. Obviously, these kinds of discussions are bringing them closer together in terms of a strategic perspective and also a collaboration for peace and prosperity. Now, then we have the London response to the Trump-Putin dialogue, and this is an editorial in the Financial Times. And you can read this as marching orders to the Gang of Four war hawks of the European Union. They write, the U.S. president said Kiev and Moscow would start negotiations toward a ceasefire, but he is leaving it up to the belligerents to sort things out. There was no sign of pressure he had hinted he might finally put on his Russian counterpart. The Financial Times editors continue. Trump's indulgence of a Russian leader who has been stringing him along for months remains baffling. Given that that's the case, European countries will need to move quickly to implement plans to keep arms flowing to Kiev if the U.S. walks away, including by buying American weapons and funding Ukraine's own expanded military industry. And it goes on to say they should double down on pressure on Putin, including more sanctions, tightening the noose on Russia's economy. Now, that's the Financial Times telling you what they think of the possibility of peace breaking out. Now, the third assassination, the third of these events, was in Washington, D.C. 2 Israeli diplomats from the Israeli embassy were assassinated yesterday. The alleged perpetrator shouted, "Free Palestine," when taken by police. Now, the timing of this is very suspicious, as opposition is growing to Netanyahu's escalation for ethnic cleansing in Palestine. And this is the kind of thing which pulls together support for Netanyahu at a point at which it's breaking apart. Now, Israel is heading toward chaos, and some people, including former prime ministers, are saying headed toward possible civil war. Meanwhile, Netanyahu continues to demonstrate a satanic contempt for international law and opinion, pushing ahead the Operation Gideon's Chariots, which is an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Now, this is what his coalition partners demand. This is what a whole section of the Israeli population, typified by these settlers, are demanding: the full exclusion of Palestinians from Israel and the land, the occupied lands. Now, there's a disregard coming from this cabinet, Netanyahu's cabinet, for the lives of remaining hostages. Also, CNN is reporting that there are indications that U.S. intelligence have picked up that the Israelis are planning an attack on Iran. This would be carried out under the idea of the breakaway ally scenario. In other words, launch an attack that forces the United States to come in and back up Israel. Now, we have 3 points of intervention I'm calling to your attention to address this situation. First, an extensive dialogue I had with Helga Zepp-LaRouche yesterday, where she spoke of seismic changes and turbulence. That report will be linked in the description section. I urge you to listen to it in full to get the sense from Mrs. Zepp-LaRouche of what the crisis is and what must be done. Secondly, there was a powerful confirmation of what Helga's talking about from British diplomat Alistair Crook on yesterday's Judging Freedom. Again, I would urge you to listen to this, as he is quite clear and quite knowledgeable as to what are the consequences of this tipping point. And then finally, and most important, is our conference this weekend, the Schiller Institute conference, where we'll report on this conjuncture and have a discussion on how to get out of it, how to move to a new paradigm that takes this tipping point and moves us away from a new dark age into an era of peace and prosperity. It requires that we, the people, act. We cannot be passive. In the face of evil and the corruption of governments, it's up to the people to act. So look at these 3 links and be with us on Saturday. Make your plans to organize to have this conference Saturday be an event that